This is CNN.
From the state of Florida this morning, officials saying preliminary results do indicate the discovery of a second case of anthrax in that state. The subject is the co-worker of a man who died last week from the disease, but initial tests read positive. However, doctors are saying they need a lot more testing to determine whether the anthrax is advanced. For more on this, we turn to our medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. We don't want to push any panic buttons here.
Right.
Again, this is a case where a man has signs and indications of anthrax, but he's not infected. Make the distinction for us.
Yeah, and it's an important distinction, Bill. What we're talking about here specifically is a second diagnosis of anthrax being present, and in this case specifically within the nasal cavity. Sort of what happens in situations like this, after the first case, clinical symptoms, people were screened within the company where this gentleman worked, and they found that in fact another gentleman did have anthrax only in the nasal cavities. Hasn't had any symptoms yet. Another important point, because as we've learned over the past few weeks, if you actually start the antibiotics, which they have done in this case, your chance of actually preventing symptoms from ever developing is exponentially higher. So this is a second diagnosis of anthrax, no symptoms yet, much better chance of success, and in some ways a public health sort of success here, because they were actually able to find a case of the anthrax before the symptoms developed.
So clearly they got to him early then, when the first case they did not.
That's right, and that was an important thing. That's what they were trying to do. They talked about these mass screening sort of programs that they were going to try and carry out. And certainly here in this case, they found somebody and hopefully can treat that person.
I want to stay away from speculation, but that building where Robert Stevens worked, the man who passed away last week, has been cordoned off. They're taking inspectors through to try and determine more and discover more. What will they look for at this time? And should the people who were in there be indeed concerned at all?
Well, I think it's certainly fair to say that people should have their caution sort of raised, but on the other hand, it sounds like the public health officials have found a single air sample over there that did contain some anthrax. So some very specific plans in place, you know, preventative plans for the most part, but basically people who have been in the building since August 1st should probably be tested. They're not recommending antibiotics to be given to family members or other people in contact with Mr. Stevens or this new gentleman, because again, as we've said so many times, anthrax is not contagious. It's not something that you're going to get from one person to another person. There was some anthrax, specifically the bacteria that causes anthrax, found in the building, but again, we're going to have to sort of see what that means.
And just to follow up on that, how would that anthrax enter a building?
It's a good question, and I don't think we're sure yet. That's specifically what the FBI is investigating. You know, these spores can last for a long time. These spores are very resistant to environmental changes. They could have been in the building for quite some time and now causing some difficulties. And I said this before, Bill, and I think it's worth pointing out again that a few months ago, this isn't something that we probably would have even checked for.
Yeah, that is so true.
The bacteria. And now we're checking for it, and not surprisingly, we're finding some cases. You know, I think that it's important that we're finding these cases, but I'm not sure that this really means that something dramatically new has happened here.
We shall find out more throughout the day and the week. Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Bill.
Back to Paula now in New York. Paula?